Hello, I'm Harold Bailey, Chair of TEAM Westport. And on behalf of TEAM Westport, as well as the Westport Library, I'd like to welcome you tonight.
And I'm the Reverend Alison Patton. I'm pastor at Saugatuck Congregational Church, United Church of Christ here in Westport, Connecticut. And on behalf of the interfaith community and clergy, I am so glad to welcome you to this space tonight.
My name is Jenny Nelson, and on behalf of the Westport Country Playhouse, we'd love to welcome you to this discussion this evening. And now we're going to go ahead and get started with a very special video. We'd love to show from the Regional Center for the Arts. We have two brilliant young artists that have created original work in response to our events. So we're going to be watching their two monologues. So here we go.
Many people think that the world...
One second.
Oops. We do not have the sound, Jenny.
Thank you.
No, we did before.
Oh, forgive me. Thank you.
Okay.
Here we go. Such patience we all have in these times.
Many people think that the world is much safer than it was 80 years ago. They think that racism isn't as big of an issue and that most of the protests and riots that are happening today are unnecessary. I don't agree with this. Nothing about the world we live in is safe. Nothing about the world we live in is equal. And nothing about the things that we're doing to try and change it is unnecessary. There are hundreds of thousands of people fighting for their rights, screaming Black Lives Matter, and they get arrested for it. They get shot at for it. They get portrayed on TV to be these vicious, violent people, when in reality, they're just trying to live their lives unthreatened and unharmed. And then there's those people screaming, all lives matter, to try and prove that they're not racist, when in reality it just makes them look more racist, because saying all lives matter is a protest to my protest, and all lives can't matter until they see that. I have a dream that one day I won't have to tell my loved ones to be safe whenever they leave the house alone. I have a dream that one day kids won't get shot down for playing with water guns. I have a dream that one day the police will stand with us, not against us. I have a dream that one day I won't have to worry if the color of my skin will determine if I'm successful in life. I have a dream that one day all lives will matter.
My parents have always been supportive. To this day, they tell me, I believe you can do anything. So what you're saying is, I have all access to your credit cards at any time. For most of my life, I went to a private Catholic school where the majority were white students who I just never seemed to relate to, no matter how hard I tried. People already thought they were better than me without actually knowing me. Like, who are you, Jesus? You know what? My mom is going to be really happy I said that. Maybe now she'll give me all access to her credit cards. But on November 7th, when I turn on the news channel to see the first and the only woman of color vice president to ever exist, the only thing I could feel was hope. I was so used to rarely seeing any change until there was. And even though I am relieved, it definitely is long overdue. More overdue than the last time I had a boyfriend, which was back in the year never. I learned what my parents were saying and believe I myself too can be the representation I always dreamed of having. Because when that vision is planted in our younger generations, little girls like my 4-year-old sister can see themselves being celebrated for who they are and where they come from. Because this is everything our ancestors knew we were capable of, since they were the ones who fought so we could be exactly where we belong.
So wonderful. Thank you, RCA.
Absolutely. And thanks again for joining us. You know, on a typical MLK year for our event, and this is, by the way, the 15th annual MLK celebration out of the last 16 years. But typically what we've done in the past is to have a keynote speaker come in, look at the keynote speaker, get some great ideas, get excited, get overjoyed, and leave. This year, thanks to the brilliant work of Layla Saad and Me and White Supremacy as the vehicle with its 28-day challenge, we're able to invite the entire community to engage over a period of about 6 weeks in a way that is deeply personal and profoundly beneficial. So we're kicking things off with this first MLK week celebration, and there'll be some other things that'll happen with the challenge during the entire month of February, starting February 1st through February 28th. Okay, so that's our objective here, is to make sure that as many folks as possible take up that challenge of continuing the celebration beyond this week to the 28-day challenge. Tonight, what we're going to do is drill down on several of the key takeaways from the session on Sunday, which was our first session between Layla Saad and Bernstein McLeod Bailey. And then we're going to address the question of why take on this challenge. And then we'll follow up tonight with tips on getting through that challenge for those to decide to go ahead. And we hope that everyone will, if at all possible. Now, while we're going through our session tonight, there will be no chat, but there will be a Q&A button down at the bottom of the screen. And the idea is that you can input any questions that you might have along the way. And what we plan to do is every Monday, starting February 1st, is to drop a recorded video with our answers to questions that have accumulated in the week before that. So we're going to start that week. This time we're going to say week and a half, because it's from today up to about January 29th or so. And then we'll video out the answers in a package that will drop on February 1st, and we've got February 8th, February 15th, all the way through the end of the month. So let's get started. If we're talking about Me and White Supremacy, as I mentioned, Bernstein had the conversation with Layla Saad on Sunday, and actually Bernstein and I, as well as Alex Giannini from the library, had a chance to speak with Layla a few days before that. So there were really two conversations. And so what I wanted to do is to drill down a little bit on some of the key takeaways from both those conversations. The question that always pops up is, how much experience do you need to have to go through the 28-day challenge that's in Me and White Supremacy? In case you are not familiar with it, the challenge is one where there are 28 different perspectives on white supremacy / racism that the reader is asked to take a look at over 28 straight days. And the idea is that each day there will be a journaling of what on that perspective, and a journaling as to the way it affects you personally, not how it affects people in general, or white people in general, or black people in general, or anything other than how it affects you personally. So the question is, to go through that kind of a regimen, what do you need to know to be ready for this? What do you have to have? What kind of experience and knowledge? And Layla Saad was very clear on the fact that there is no prerequisite for knowledge. It's not how many books you've read or how much experience you've had doing the work of anti-racism and learning about what's been going on in the world. This book can just as easily, this process, this challenge can just as easily be your first step as it can be your step if you've been at this for many, many years. So there's no knowledge that's needed to start. What's important is your emotional state and your ability to be honest with yourself and take this on. And also the emotionality to be ready to stick with it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. I think Alison will talk about that. The key hurdle is what you feel, not how much you know. Now, the objective for going through this, as the book titled, kind of a subtitle is to develop good ancestors. Now, what do we mean by good ancestors? Well, that's good ancestors versus what in communities such as ours, that is about 95% white, is generally, we don't talk good ancestors, we talk good people. Because people say, well, look, we're good people, we've got great values. We don't believe in any of that white supremacist stuff. That's not us, that's somebody else. The issue here is that you can proclaim those values and not take on the issue of racism and not do anything to dismantle it. Good ancestors actually take on white supremacy or racism and try to dismantle it. That we call anti-racism, that's that process. And in the United States, what that means is that you're taking on the 400-year-old big lie of the social construct of race. And that race and that big lie and all of its subsets of microaggressions and memes and policies that are out there surrounds each and every one of us in the world. Now, in terms of what you need to be able to take that on, there's nothing more important than self-knowledge versus knowledge about what's going on, quote, out there. And one of the things that's very important is as we go to lectures, we read books, we talk to people, we take a look and we, quote, do the work of learning about this big lie and how to dismantle it. In a lot of ways, what we're doing is looking through a window at the world that's outside of us. What this challenge enables us to do and invites us to do is to look at a mirror instead and to see what's inside of us. And the reason that's important is because when we talk about a 400-year-old process that's gone on, there's a lot that's been built up. There's generations of supremacy, generations of memes, generations of policies that have been put in place. All of that has to be dug through that make us think many of the things that are strictly, completely off the charts in terms of being complete false memes are absolute facts. And that's because we don't have just one generation of these memes and policies and cultural norms being put out there, but we have generation upon generation of it out there. We have layers of it. It's what my great-great-grandmother told my great-grandmother. It's what my uncle said. It's what my great-uncle said. It's what my brothers and sisters learned from other family members that are out there. All of that is layered and steeped in so that we have unconscious reactions to seeing a Black person as an example, to the language that's used that might not be, quote, quite right, to our negative assumptions that we have about people of color when they walk in the room or if they apply for a job and so on. So all of that gets baked in. And it's very hard to see when you're in it and it's surrounding you what it is. And as such, the challenge is really framed for white people and people of color who can actually pass for white, to be able to take a look beyond that, to pierce that veil and see what's really happening inside themselves, the way they're reacting to all of those different aspects of white supremacy or racism in depth. Now, without that kind of knowledge, what you end up with is a situation where there's a lack of authenticity in relationships. And let me turn that around and say, with that kind of self-knowledge, where you know the way this milieu of race is affecting you, when you get ready to sit down and talk to someone of color, or when you get ready to do the work of working on policy to dismantle dismantle the anti-racism, that with it you've got an authenticity, confidence that you cannot possibly have if what you're out there doing is just reading a book and learning about stuff over there and learning about someone over there. There's an authenticity that's there that will help you not only have more confidence, but actually be far more effective in speaking to people and communicating, and frankly, in understanding what's going on. So the real benefit, another real benefit of the challenge is it won't just be what you know, but it's what you will genuinely understand and be able to communicate. Now, the 28-day challenge does help you see racism in yourself, and it's very much focused, like on kind of a laser focus on those 28 different aspects we talked about, with key questions around each one of those aspects. That, when you think about it, could be a very daunting task or challenge of something to take on and go through. But the truth is, finding that racism in yourself is not a bad thing, but a good thing. It's a good thing to bring it to the surface. It's a good thing so you are able to address it. Otherwise, you're flying blind and you don't know what's actually going on inside of yourself. It's also that key, as we mentioned before, to getting more confidence and having that authenticity with respect to doing this work. The big thing to understand is you have to accept that the racism within you, and by the way, it's the racism that's within each and every one of us, that racism is not all of who you are. It's not all of who anyone is. I don't care, even the extremists. There's much more to your self-worth than the racism within you. So you should look at this as an opportunity to identify and address that racism. And in effect, by addressing it, you're going to be building on your self-worth. So in terms of the internal work that you're going to be doing, that work, that addressing what's inside of you, is being done to provide far more personally authentic effectiveness for you in dismantling racism. So a lot of whether or not you do something or you don't, or whether you get some benefit out of it or you don't, is perspective. One of the perspectives that is very important, and I think Layla made it very, very clear over and over, is this process should not be what it's doing to you, it should be what it's doing for you. And in that sense, because it's providing the benefits we just talked about, it should be energizing, positive, and it should be overall a liberating experience for everyone who gets through this process to its completion. In the sense that it's liberating you from the poisoning conundrums of racism, that big lie that we talked about that's been there for the last 400 years. Finally, overall, this is not a sprint. A lot of people want to go through it. Let me see if I can get through and do my journaling every day, get that done, and get to the end. And wow, it's like I've finished the course. No, it's a starting point, but it's meant to be a marathon. You're going to put down where you are at any given, during the month of February as an example. And the idea is that you will continue to go back to your journals. And for any one of those aspects, be able to update the changes you've seen, the lights that have gone on, the new perspectives that you have in those areas. So it is a living, breathing, dynamic document that can go on for you. We did ask the question, give us, whether or not that Layla had seen some examples of results in the feedback that she'd gotten from folks who'd gone through this challenge. And of course, she's had many hundreds of letters and testimonials about results. There are a couple that were interesting. One was her publisher, who told her that as a result of the leadership team at the publishing company having gone through this, they have completely revamped the way that they look at new material that's being submitted, specifically material that's being submitted by BIPOC or Black, Indigenous, and other people of color when they submit materials. And they're looking at changing the way they look at the material they've gotten traditionally that are from white authors. So it's changing their whole way of evaluating what is and is not of value. Another one had to do with a white mother of a mixed race child who had been having a very difficult time seeing what she had gone through growing up and the difference that her child, as a mixed race child, what they were seeing in going through school. And she didn't feel that she had had the tools or the language to be able to go and stand up for a child effectively at school. After going through this process, she found she did have not only the tools and the words to do it, but she had the confidence to be able to go in and talk about what some of this differential was and what needed to be done to address it for a child at school. I mean, those are just two examples. There are many, many more. The main point is we very much invite you to take this challenge and hope that you will take us up on it. So I'll now pass things on to Alison.
Thank you, Harold. Harold has just lifted up some of the reasons why this work is meaningful and why it's worth pursuing. I want to offer one more angle on how this work can impact what we do collectively in community to dismantle racism. And to do that, I want to share with you a graph that came across my Facebook page just a few days ago. This is a graph that's created and commented on by Oh Happy Danny, and you can find her. She has a public page on Facebook. Maybe you recognize this cycle of inaction. Maybe some of this resonates with you. When there is a horrific injustice in our midst, how many of us experience shock and confusion, which stirs up all kinds of emotions and prompts us to want to take some action. And so we as white people might engage in what we call performative allyship, which means that we look for visible ways to demonstrate that we are allies, that we are deeply horrified by the injustice and want to be part of the solution. If it is performative, then it's often accompanied by guilt and fatigue. We wear out quickly. And when we get worn out, it leads to inaction and passivity, and finally apathy until the next horrific injustice occurs. We want to break this cycle of inaction. So here's the alternative as imagined by Oh Happy Danny. When a horrific injustice takes place, rather than being overtaken by shock and confusion, as if the fruit of systemic oppression is surprising, our emotional response is marked by empathy and compassion, which leads to a rejection of performative allyship for shallow demonstrations of our empathy in exchange for the real and vigorous work of being an ally for the long haul. And should guilt and fatigue try to settle in, Jenny, if you can scroll up just a tiny bit, there's a really important line that's just below the bottom of the screen. We want to recenter our needs on here we go, we'll pull it back up, on those who are the victims of oppression, right? We want to recenter those who suffer injustice on a daily basis. So instead of focusing as allies on our own discomfort, if we're doing the work in a long, intentional, and sustained way, then we can remember that the real focus needs to be on those who have been the target of racism all along. We do that remembering that inaction and passivity are detrimental to justice, and that apathy is the antithesis of unconditional love. I love this cycle of action because it reminds us that this is what we aspire to do and to be. We are trying to find the tools that will help us sustain this work over the long term, right? So that we don't get burned out, so that we as white folks don't ineffectively show up in the short term and then get worn out and run down and drop the ball and leave it for others to take up. That's the goal, right, of this work. So here's the invitation, right? Here's the reason that we're all gathered this evening. We want you to join us for this 28-day challenge. Step 1, pick up a book and a journal. While supplies last, you can get your own copy of both the book and the journal at the Westport Library. They have purchased quantities to give away to the community as part of Westport Reads. There's the cover for you right there, Me and White Supremacy. And because the library is closed to the public during this pandemic, you just need to call and make an appointment to drop in. But then the books are there and available and are being given away to you. You can also borrow a book from one of your public libraries. You can access the audiobook for free on Hoopla, and you can do that through the Westport Library. Or you can purchase a copy. And if you're going to do that, I encourage you to do so through a Black-owned bookstore. And you can just Google Black-owned bookstores to find whole lists of bookstores both here in Connecticut and around the country from which you can order your own copy and then buy extra copies for your friends. Once you have picked up the book and gotten a journal, which might be a blank book or the journal that was just published by Sourcebooks, it was created by Layla Saad to accompany the book itself. Once you have those in hand, we invite you to register. There you go, there's the guided journal. Thank you, Harold. We invite you to actually register for this 28-day challenge. We would love to know how many people here in the Westport Weston area are participating. And when you register, we will be able to reach you to share with you links to those weekly check-ins that we're going to drop on Mondays that respond to the questions that you send us during the week. So it will give you a chance to engage with us, and we'll know that you're out there, so we'll know that we have this community of folks that are engaged in this work together. Finally, once you have the book and once you've registered, set aside some time during your day, every day in February. Decide how and where you're going to do your reading and your journaling. Here's what you can expect from the book itself. You've picked up already that it has 28 chapters. So that's one chapter for every day in February. The chapters are really short, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 pages. So each chapter is brief and it covers a single topic related to white supremacy. It starts with some broader topics and then picks up more specific themes like colorblindness or tokenism or cultural appropriation. Every chapter provides concrete examples, i.e., how colorblindness shows up, or what tokenism looks like in action. And then every chapter concludes with a series of questions that serve as journaling prompts. So this book is both incredibly accessible and at the same time challenging. It's a book that allows you to get through a chapter in 5 minutes, but invites you to spend an hour mulling over the questions that are raised, right? And as Harold has already lifted up, part of the invitation is for you to really lean into that time and give yourself space to sit with and reflect on each of the questions. Some of the concepts that you encounter in this book may already be familiar, and some of them may be brand new to you. You might be tempted to journal about the ways that you have been a good ally. You might read particularly those topics that seem familiar and say, oh yes, I get this. But the invitation is to dig a little bit deeper, to identify the patterns and the forces and the influences that we as white people need to address. Here's what else you can expect. You can expect that we're going to be here with you all through the month of February. If you register to participate, you'll receive the email address to which you can direct questions that pop up for you as you work through each chapter. And Jenny and Harold and I will receive those questions, and we will group them together, and we will offer responses, videotape those responses as Harold described, and post that video every Monday during the month of February. We hope that that structure will both offer you encouragement and also hold us all accountable to stick with the work throughout the month, knowing that there's others who are doing this too. And because this is challenging work, I also want to encourage you to take up the advice of Layla Saad and decide now, before you begin, what is going to help you to stay committed to this work when the going gets tough. Really mull that over. Is it that desire to sustain your energy for the long haul? Are there people in your life that you love for whom you want to show up more effectively? What is it that motivates you to pick up this book at this time? Take the first page of your journal and write it down. Write down that reason for doing this work so you can turn back to it and remind yourself and hold yourself accountable and keep yourself energized and inspired over the course of the project. And as I said, we will be doing that with you. With that, I want to hand this over to Jenny, who's going to offer some additional tips to guide you through this work.
Thank you so much, Alison and Harold. And I love that idea of intention. Having intention in this work is what's going to keep us energized and drive us throughout the challenge of the 28-day challenge. So I'm here to share some tips, some ways to continue on the challenge should you choose to do it. So just reiterating, Alison and Harold both really carving out time. Being intentional means setting a specific time when you know your schedule, when you're able to really carve out time for quiet, for reflection, and to be able to do the work deeply. So whether that's early in the morning, that would be my time right before everyone's awake and I can have my coffee and I can sit here with these questions and really give them the time that they need and being intentional about that. So making a schedule will be helpful on the journey. Keep it personal. This is strictly confidential with you and yourself alone. That's important. Of course, if you feel the need to share, which some of this work, this is heart work, this is soul work. If you feel that you need to share, of course, that's of your need, but this is also really confidential for you and to kind of let it sit with you as you're going through the work. Try to not reach out and also try to not reach out to specifically, especially people of color, and really shouldering that emotional work for people of color. This is really the work for you to do alone. And remember that you're working towards personal change and accountability. It's important to go at your own pace. This is a 28-day challenge, but if you do it quicker than 28 days, that's fine, as long as we're giving it its time and its due. If you miss a day, that's okay. We can give ourselves grace and forgive, and we can make up that day. We can catch up and continue, or it might take us more than 28 days. That's really okay. You can take this at your own pace. As we said, some of it may go very quickly, and some of it may take longer. That's really up to the pace that you decide. Who is this book for? This book is for white and for people of color who can pass as white. Who is this? What is recommended for people of color? Of course, read the book and journal as you feel appropriate. And if you are a person of color and want to be in conversation with white people about this book, we're going to be planning to provide vehicles for you to do that in March. So we'll be rolling out that information so that we can all engage in the conversation. And try to stick with this. Although the knowledge unearthed may feel uncomfortable or destabilizing at the moment, when we're uncomfortable, it means that we're growing, we're changing, we're learning. So being able to sit in the uncomfortable is actually where growth happens. So really, I would even recommend to lean into that uncomfortable feeling and see where that journey takes you, rather than saying, I don't want to feel this uncomfortable feeling, which is our kind of fight or flight. Really try to lean into that and see where that leads to, what introspection you might gain from that. And above all, if you're reading this book and you get some of the ways through and you decide for whatever reason, and only you would know, this book isn't for you, that's okay. You can read a different one. There are so many resources out there, and we're so fortunate to live in a time to have so many exceptional resources in this work. You can read a different one, right? And the Westport Reads 2021 selections are a great place to start. We have Cast and Underground Railroad and Class Act and a lot of other great resources. You can also come back. If you stop and take a break for self-care or for whatever reason, you can always revisit this challenge. The work will always be there. The most important thing is to keep going and to keep doing the work. So I'll hand it back over to Harold.
Thanks a lot, Jenny, and thanks, Allison, as well. I do want to say that in the late 1960s, when Nina Simone first released the song "To Be Young, Gifted, and Black," one of the things she did, performing it for audiences live, and I happen to be fortunate enough to have been among some of those audiences, was to go into an invocation of the ancestors in the middle of the song. So she'd start singing about it, and obviously it's a song that aspirationally talks about how beautiful it is to be young, to be gifted, to be Black, and it's something that's put together to actually aspire for and inspire coming generations. But she would, in the middle of it, invoke past ancestors, past great authors and contributors to works in this country. And in that sense, what we're talking about here is and she was talking about in that song, is building those kind of ancestors. And the ancestors she invoked were people like Lorraine Hansberry, as an example, who had passed away at the time, and to whom the song is actually dedicated. And to others who had passed on, who had made a big difference. In this case, this week, we're talking about Martin Luther King, for an example. This session, or this process that we're talking about, is to help us build those kind of good ancestors, and for you to be one of those as we move forward. So we've got the treat coming up now of of having our young artists actually perform that song. When you listen to it, please listen to it with that perspective in mind. And we certainly hope that you will join us and go about the work of going through this challenge to become a good ancestor in the future. Thank you.
Let's hear it for RCA. Thank you to Dr. Ribbons and the staff and the students at Regional Center for the Arts. What a way to lift us up and end this wonderful time together. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you so much, Jenny, and hi everybody. It's Alex from the library. Thank you all for joining us for joining us tonight for this important conversation, and thank you to Jenny, Allison, and Harold for taking the lead on this. To sign up for the updates that they talked about during the program, please follow the Eventbrite link that's in the chat. You can sign up for one of them, or I realized that I put all 5 dates on there. If you sign up for one of them, we have your email and we will send you the updates, we promise. If you signed up for all 5, I apologize. You will still get the updates though. And if you have questions that you'd like to submit to our team after the program, you can do so by emailing education@westportplayhouse.org. And please be sure to sign up for Thursday evening's program from the Playhouse entitled New Works, New Voices, 4 monologues on the themes of Layla F. Saad's Me and White Supremacy. At this world premiere, locally based theater artists Gracie Brown, Tanisi Davis, Tamika Petway, and Terrence Riggins continue Dr. King's legacy through 4 new monologues recorded on stage at the Westport Country Playhouse. Again, that's Thursday at 7 o'clock, and that link is also in the chat. You can also find it over at westportplayhouse.org. And finally, if you'd like to support our community's ongoing anti-racism work, please consider a donation to Team Westport. You can do so by texting Team Westport to 91999, or by sending a check to Team Westport, care of Department of Finance, Town Hall, 110 Myrtle Avenue in Westport, Connecticut, 06880. And that information is also in the chat. And with that, once again, to Harold, Allison, and Jenny, thank you all for tonight. And thank you all out there for joining us tonight. We hope you'll join us for the journey ahead. If you have questions, please submit them. And in the meantime, be safe, be well, and have a good night, everybody.